And we can check back in later. And if we have a quorum, we can move forward with those voting items. So with that, why don't we move forward with item 4, presentation from Polk County. Gunnar, are you going to kick us off?
Yes, thank you very much. As we've been doing recently, we've been inviting our member jurisdictions to provide presentations on things happening in the region. This is in the interest of helping everyone have situational awareness of things happening or maybe best practices. So today we have Brett Vanderloon with Polk County, and I'll turn it over to Brett.
Good morning, everybody. Give me just a second while I get my presentation up. All right, do you got the slideshow up now?
We do.
Thanks. Yes.
Okay, give this a go. That's always fun to make that transition and have it work or not work. So here we go. So yeah, I got 3 projects to talk to you the guys this morning about. It's our Broadway Avenue project that's currently under construction, and then a couple of future projects, Easton Boulevard and Highway 141 and 415 interchange project. So the Broadway Avenue project, we're converting just over 5 miles of 2-lane rural roadway cross section into a 3-lane urban cross section, with the significant piece being Union Pacific Railroad bridge, where there's some uneven tracks. We're giving the Union Pacific a bridge that's currently an at-grade crossing, so that's part of what we'll talk about as well. So yeah, project features, I just referenced that railroad bridge, also a 10-foot wide trail on the west side, it connects to the Gailey Wilson Trail at 4 Mile Creek. And then from there, it transitions to the east as a sidewalk all the way over to Hubble. So 5 miles of trail and sidewalk, also street, trail, sidewalk lighting on the corridor. For the cities, lighting isn't a big deal. For the county, it is. It's the first time we've ever added lighting to a street project along the whole corridor. So additional through and turn lanes at the major intersections of 415 Northwest 2nd, US 69, which is Northeast 14th, and US 6 at Hubble. And I'm just going to jump back quick. So where we're at, just for those that aren't super familiar or aware or new to the area. So just south of Interstate 80, south of the East Mixmaster, and the Broadway goes underneath 235. So in the area between Des Moines and Ankeny in central Polk County. So talking about that railroad bridge being the main component, a couple of pictures that I just added in this morning to give context to see some of the grades. So the picture on the left looking east, you're headed up towards the railroad tracks, and the one on the right is looking down, looking west, and you can see in the foreground the first set of tracks, and then just beyond those is another set of tracks, and there's a grade change between those tracks. There's been a number of accidents because of the grade changes between those tracks, and people coming down this hill and ending up in the ditches and taking out fences, and there's been a couple of fatalities as well. So the couple of things, cross section, talked about it with the 10-foot side trail, urban cross section, concrete curbs, asphalt pavement for the roadway surfaces. A couple of roundabouts at Northeast 38th and Northeast 46th in Des Moines, and just showing the plan set cut sheet there. And then also the intersection changes. The intersection I showing on the right there is Northeast 14th Street. So widening out the curves. If you're familiar with that intersection, big overhead truss traffic signals, those are going to be coming out here soon as part of the construction. So there'll be new signals there as well. Goals for the project to improve safety and for pedestrians, bicyclists and vehicular traffic. Enhance the roadway for industrial and commercial freight traffic. It's a big corridor, east to west, and with a lot of industrial and commercial development in the middle as well. Provide that protected side path trail facilities to meet those pedestrian and bicycle needs. And then to improve stormwater quality runoff along the corridor. Along the corridor, there's going to be 19 biocells, edge of curb items, and then also stormwater, wetland, and a dry bottom detention basin and a wet bottom detention basin as part of those stormwater improvements. So how do you make 5 miles fit on a sheet of paper for handouts and displays? You cut it into 3 strips and put it on a piece of paper that's still, even somebody that's familiar to looking at it, it's still hard to look at, but kind of gives you a glimpse of it across the top, starting west to east. To the west is Bridgestone Firestone, and then driving down the corridor to northeast 14th Street, picking it back up at 14th Street and heading east to 4 Mile Creek. And then from there, 38th Avenue roundabout, 46th roundabout, and then that extends to Hubble. So this project is, we first applied for a build grant in fiscal year 2018. Our third time was a charm. In fiscal year 2020, we were awarded the $25 million build grant. And then construction, permitting, construction, all of that got going in force last construction season. And our project end is the end of 26. And so in construction right now, the east end of the project is nearing completion from 38th Street east. Just waiting on finishing out the roundabouts. And then the west side is in the middle of construction. If you've been between 14th and 2nd on Broadway, it's full on construction. 1 lane is open, but pretty a lot going on. Some lessons learned. So or learning, because we're still learning stuff as we go. So these, I guess, would be for all projects, but some that I've come very familiar with on this project. So communication. Start from the very beginning, continue that communication all the way through, keep the communication going. Sometimes it's annoying to get included on communication with its emails or meetings, but the more you can keep people informed or aware of your partners that you're working with, improve communication. Same goes with coordination. Just keep that coordination up, knowing what each partner or stakeholder expects. Be clear in your communication and coordination with timing and expectations. Dealing with the railroad, I know it's kind of everybody knows dealing with the railroad's a challenge. When you're trying to give them a bridge as part of the improvements, it's even a bigger challenge. It's been a colossal battle for us and continues. Utility conflicts, again, something that comes up in a lot of projects. Been a lot of lessons learned dealing with the utilities. Sometimes you got to hold them hostage, which is kind of where we've ended up, had to hold permits for companies throughout the county so that they finally get on the ball on Broadway. And with those utility conflicts, they just hold up construction. Project timing, scheduling, and staging. We initially tried to bid it all as one project. Bids were crazy high during that time, and so broke it into 2 stages. Also from being able to get the railroad figured out. Trying to keep costs close to the estimates has been a super challenge. So anything you can do to limit costs. And then dealing with federal grant. Many of us have dealt with federal funding. Federal grant comes with a little challenge on the build grant. Anybody that's done one or is looking to do one, I guess the word of advice there is if you put it in as something that you're going to do, once you get awarded, you can't take it out, even if there's a huge cost issue or something going on. So if it's a maybe, unless you think it's what's going to get you the grant, maybe not include it. So that was something where we had a few things that have been nice to have been able to pull back on as our costs got out of hand, but we're not able to take anything out. So our timeline, so reference this, we're under construction. What's up next is kind of the middle of the project. And then the grand finale is the UP Railroad Bridge, not yet bid, scheduled to bid this fall with the full completion by the end of 26. Next up, Easton Boulevard. So this is a project with Des Moines and Pleasant Hill as partners. This is between Pleasant Hill and Des Moines on the east side of the county. Project is from 4 Mile Creek east to Northeast 56th Street. There's a mix of old 2-lane urban section, transitions into rural open ditch section, and then has a couple of Ys on 56th Street as Easton, or 23rd Avenue as we call it, connects into Northeast 56th Street. And as you can see from the jurisdiction lines, the jurisdiction limits go in and out. So to the west is Des Moines. The middle is a mix of mostly county, and then Des Moines on the north, Pleasant Hill on the south, then back to the county with Pleasant Hill on the south, and then back to the city of Des Moines, and then back to the county. So there's your jurisdictional boundaries for a project like this. So project features on this one, converting that rural cross section to urban, adding turn lanes to improve through traffic, add pedestrian facilities, again, lighting and pedestrian facilities, something the county hasn't done on projects. Those are a part of this project from beginning to end. And then roundabouts at the end of the corridor at Northeast 56th Street to improve those Y intersections. And that's kind of one of the big pieces of this project. So here's a project layout for it. Again, long corridors. How do you display those and make them look nice? Split it into screens. From 4 Mile Creek, headed from the west to east. You see the cross section, and then I guess the feature at the end of it, changing this Y and putting in a roundabout and dead ending a couple of other legs of those Ys. So I got another screen with that here. So our goal is very similar to Broadway, improve safety for everybody, enhance the corridor, in this case, not for commercial industrial users, but for commuters and local workers, improve the access to food, jobs, and other necessities by providing those alternative means of ways for people to get down and through the corridor, and improving stormwater runoff and quality through the corridor with enhancements. So trying to reduce that congestion too, because traffic volumes keep going up as the development occurs in the adjacent properties, but also in the communities and the people that use this as a commuting route. So here's a drone shot looking north on Northeast 56th Street, showing that where Easton or 23rd Avenue connects into 56, currently at Wise. So the proposal is to close this one off, put in a roundabout here, and then there's another Y here. So close off this one, have the road to the east, and then another roundabout. So a couple of roundabouts approximate to each other. And here's that concept as it exists in our current concept for the project. So timing on this one is I believe it's in for like fiscal year 28, 29. We keep pushing it back a little bit as the project has grown, and as we look to options. We have gotten a couple of awards from STBG funding for this project. Third and last on the list is the 141, 415 interchange improvements. And so this is a DOT, Polk County, City of Johnston area. There's a couple of things going on here. Most of our project is specific to the 415, 141 interchange, but there's a DOT project involved with this because it's their roadways, but some connectivity to some of our roadways. So project that's going on or be starting soon is the right in, right out of 121st Street, closing off the middle of the intersection, and a new road will come off of Highway 415 and connect up to 106th, and all traffic, then that traffic will be routed there. So the improvements here are to basically make the corridor access restricted, but also provide safe passage for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists by adding a trail on what would be the existing interchange here and connecting it over to 121st, require a bridge over Beaver Creek, and a new road up to the subdivision that has direct access to the north here. Would love to say as a planner that I wasn't part of anything to do with that development, but it came in early in my career at Polk County, and we didn't like it, but as it happens, it went in and got access. So now having to try to fix that problem. So here's a drone shot looking at that interchange that exists today headed south. So again, referencing that new road that's going to go head to the north is going to connect over here across from the road that goes south. And then this extension would go all the way over to 121st. The other part of this project as we look south is the city of Johnston and Polk County. There's a Towner Drive that is right along Beaver Creek that again, at-grade access challenges to the corridor, and Johnston has some proposed development. County can get rid of an at-grade road that has some challenges being next to Beaver Creek, and so there's a proposal here for an interchange to go in across from Beaver Creek Golf Club, and would eliminate the accesses for Towner Drive onto 141 as well. Polk County and Johnston submitted a raise application. We submitted last year and submitted again this year for that funding. So here, converting that 141 corridor to access restricted, basically from north of Grimes to Highway 17, and then improve safety, roadway network reliability for commuters and residents, and support economic development specific to Johnston's interchange, and improve stormwater. So a lot of goals are the same on all of these. Timeline for this project is dependent upon that raise funding and some DOT scheduling for some of those improvements. So some of it may happen without the other, but our goal is to have it all happen. So this is the timeline. If we get that raise funding, I'll be looking somewhere in that 2031 timeline. So just yeah, trying to give an overview of what we have going on, regional projects in the area. I know I loved listening to everybody's presentations when I was on NPO Tech, so hopefully I didn't bore too many people with the presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
Well, Brett, I for one really appreciate the update. It's really helpful to see, in particular, to see the county kind of pushing the envelope on some of the safety and non-motorized road user safety that you guys are including. So nice work.
Thanks, Luis. Thanks, everybody.
And I'll just add that if there are other topics you want to hear about, please reach out to me, and know that we'll be reaching out to you if we don't hear from you. So we'd love to have any suggestions for upcoming presentations.
So that was item 4. Recall that we skipped ahead because we didn't have a quorum, but we do have a quorum now. So I'm actually going to go back to item 2, a vote on approval of the agenda. I'm going to ask for a motion and a second on approval of our agenda today.
So move. This is Neighbor.
This is Rudy, I'll second.
Thank you, Steve and Rudy. This being a virtual meeting, I'm just going to call a vote and ask for those who are opposed. Is there any opposed to the motion? Hearing none, item 2 is approved. Now I'm going to ask for a vote to approve the meeting minutes of our April 1st, 2024 meeting. Do we have a motion and a second?
Hi, before you do that, this is Carol Maher. I was noted in the minutes as belonging to Tool Design. I'm just a lowly resident of Des Moines. So I'm not getting paid to be here. I'm just a resident.
Carol, you're anything but lowly, but we will ask staff to note that in the in some amended minutes.
Thank you.
I'll move with the amendment to the correction on attendance with Carol. Thank you.
This is Rudy, I'll second that.
Thank you, Steve and Rudy. We have a motion and a second. Are there any opposed to the motion? Hearing none, item 3 passes. So now we're going to move on to item 5, report and vote on the FY 2025 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget. Dylan.
Thank you. We have the final work program and budget, the final draft of the work program and budget. This group approved the draft back in March. We submitted that to Iowa DOT. We got comments back last week. They were very minor, no major changes to what you saw a couple of months ago. So we'd ask for approval, move this up the chain to the Executive Policy Committee so we can get that submitted by the end of this month, so it can take effect beginning of July 1st. If you go on to the next slide, this is the same information we showed you last time. I won't walk through all of these in detail, but if there are questions, I'm happy to go into them further. The one comment that was made back in March when you approved the draft was to add that very bottom one, that Midwest Intercity Passenger Rail Initiative. So we did put that in there. The policy committee did approve the draft with that change made. Other than that, everything is exactly the same as what you saw last time. DOT had a couple very minor things, but it didn't change the content of the work product or the budget really. We flipped through these the next couple ones. So this is task 1, that was more planning and studies. Task 2 is more of our data collection and research, analysis and so forth. So you can see the activities we have going on there. Task 3 is more of the funding and programming. So the SDBG funds, the TIP and so forth. And then finally, task 4 is stakeholder engagement. So our public involvement process, stakeholder meetings, and that sort of thing. I think that really wraps up our key pillars of what we do. If there's any questions, though, any comments, anything you want to go back and look at, and Gunnar, I think that's the last one. You might want to flip ahead one more, but I think, task 5, program and our operations, that's the 5th one. Those are really the 5 key things that we work on. But if there's any questions, comments, anything like that, happy to take them. Otherwise, we'd ask for your approval. And again, the budget would take effect. All these work activities would start taking effect July 1st. So I'll pause there. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Dylan? There's no questions. I'll go ahead and call a vote. Do we have a motion to approve this draft work program to move it forward to the policy committee?
This is Rudy. I'll move approval.
We have a second.
Jeff May, second.
Thank you, Rudy and Jeff. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, item 5 passes. Next up, item 6, report on mobilizing tomorrow. Zach.
Thank you. I just wanted to give everyone a quick update on where we're at with our Mobilizing Tomorrow update. That's the region's long-range transportation plan. Just as a reminder, this is something that we are required to update every 4 years. The last time we updated this plan was back in 2019, so it's time to do that again. The plan looks out to the year 2050, and this update is due by the end of November of this year. The most recent thing that we have collected, we solicited projects from our member governments. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been able to submit projects. I know it's a pretty big ask. It takes a little bit of time, so appreciate everybody's busy. So thank you for getting your projects submitted. We had 172 projects submitted so far through this process for the 2025 through 2034 timeframe. We are still anticipating getting projects from Polk County that we have not received yet. There's a pie chart over there on the side that you can kind of see the makeup of the projects we received. We did request that people put them into the categories that we have for STBG. You can see there that the majority of the projects are coming in for major reconstruction replacement, system capacity, and then a mix of the other project types there on that pie chart. As far as time periods, we do have it broken down into 2 5-year time periods, 25 through 29, and then 2030 through 2034. So you can see there's a pretty even split on the number of projects that were submitted for each one of those time periods. Here's a chart here that shows each community that submitted projects and how many projects they submitted on average. Each community submitted around 12 projects. There are some communities missing there. You can see Carlisle, Mitchellville, Polk City, Dallas County, Warren County did not submit any projects. If you see your name on this list and you do feel that you needed projects in the long range plan, please reach out to me and we will get that rectified. And I did mention that we are still anticipating that Polk County will be submitting projects. As far as fiscal capacity goes, this is kind of an important aspect of the plan. It has to be fiscally constrained within the first 10 years of the plan. That's why we collected projects through that 10-year period. We look at the project costs that are submitted, the estimated project costs, and we apply a year of expenditure. So with our 2 time periods, we had a year of expenditure of 2027 and one for 2032. And we do a 4% annual inflation factor. This is a recommended inflation factor from the DOT that we use to estimate what those actual project costs are going to be in the future. The average estimated project cost overall these projects was around 9.6 million, so it's a little under $10 million per project. The chart here on the table, or the table here on the screen here, shows you the project costs that we have for each of those time periods. And then the projected funding that we have that was approved by our committees back in January. And as you can see, we do have fiscal capacity to complete all of these projects with some money remaining. Again, I will note that we are still anticipating some projects from Polk County, so these numbers will change a little bit, but we are showing right now that we have enough fiscal capacity to complete all of the projects that were submitted. Growth scenario update. This is kind of the next big step in the process. One of the things that changed last month, policy voted on the growth scenario numbers. They did approve those numbers, but they did want to put in some added language, some clarifying language that basically said that the numbers that we have in our plan don't limit communities from growing more than that, and some communities may expect to grow more than what we're showing in our projections. As far as getting the growth scenario out to communities, our modeling consultant that we have is wrapping up some edits to the TAZ shapefile, so making some changes to that. Once they get that to us, we'll be able to develop a spreadsheet that we can send out to each member government. This will include all of their housing and employment growth for each time period, as well as a TAZ map that they can reference and then fill in their growth into the TAZs that they are anticipating that growth will happen. Once they insert that growth and send it back to us, we'll be able to incorporate the housing and employment into our model. So as far as next steps go, as I mentioned, the growth scenarios, the next one, we'll be sending those spreadsheets out to member governments here, hopefully here very shortly, as soon as we get that TAZ file back. So we'll be collecting those, incorporating that information into the model. As I mentioned, we have our LRTP projects submitted, so we will be sending those out to get public comment on those over the next month or two, incorporating those submitted projects into the growth scenario, as I mentioned. And then also the main things after that will be updating the draft chapters, just making sure the language is cleaned up, cleaning up the maps and the tables, and getting those draft chapters out as we get them done for the committee to review. So as I mentioned, we were, very heavy on this end of the process to have your input as far as submitting projects and reviewing the growth scenario numbers, and then actually performing the growth scenario. So appreciate the time that you will have invested in that. And then moving forward, it'll mostly be just looking over those draft chapters. Z, are you covering this, or you want me to take this?
Yeah, I can cover that, Zach.
Thank you.
Thanks. So as part of the draft chapters of the LRTP, we plan on having a chapter on freight. And so as part of that chapter, MPO staff prepared a long-range freight survey for MPO member governments, as well as the Freight Roundtable. This freight survey will look at prioritizing different freight topics, identifying any freight impediments in the region, as well as kind of categorizing various freight strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the survey link is on the screen. Please feel free to share and distribute to any freight-related parties, such as those in the business community, those in economic development, or in logistics and rail companies, or anyone else interested in regional freight planning.
Thanks, Steve. So that's our update on the LRTP. Happy to take any questions if you have them.
There's no questions for Zach and Z. We thank you for that update. We're gonna move on to item 7. There's a report and an optional vote on the carbon reduction program funding process. Zach?
Yes, thank you. So wanted to provide a quick, some quick background on the carbon reduction program. You may recall that we presented on this program probably the middle of last year. At that time, we kind of provided a recommendation to hold off on making any awards until our LRTP process could be completed. The main reason for this was just to be able to maybe look more strategically at the projects that were submitted and think about how we could strategically look at our, not only the carbon reduction funds, but STBG and some of the other funding programs, and try to maybe target some areas with this funding. Also, kind of part of this history is that earlier in the year, we had applied for a EV charging grant. Unfortunately, we did not receive that grant. There were some communities who expressed some interest in looking at alternatives to that. So we did come back to the committee to see if there was any interest in using the carbon reduction program funds to fund those EV charging stations. And at that time, the tech committee didn't really feel like that was the direction they wanted to go with the carbon reduction program funding, and asked us to look at other alternatives. Additionally, during our 2028 STBG funding cycle, the carbon reduction funding came up in the discussion with the funding subcommittee when they requested if that funding might be used to help stabilize DART. And so ultimately, that's what was presented to policy committee last month, and they voted to award DART $3.6 million in CRP funding. But as part of that recommendation, it was clear that we needed to come back and look at how the other communities might get access to the carbon reduction funding. So that's what we're really here to talk about today, is what does that process look like moving forward. If you go to the next screen, it'll show you a table that kind of outlines the amount of carbon reduction funding that we currently have available to us. Kind of pay attention to the bold lines there. So because we gave the $3.6 million to DART, that took up our 23 and 24 allocations and some of the 25 allocations. So that project is programmed in 25. We have almost 700,000 left in 25, and then in 26 we have a little over 1.5 million, and then in 27 and 28 we have a little over 1.6 million available in carbon reduction program funding. So in total, we have a little over $5.5 million in CRP funding available to award out to projects. So we felt like it would be a good idea to have somebody from the DOT come in and give a quick kind of update on an overview of the CRP program in general, kind of what the eligible uses are, and what some of the other MPOs are doing with their CRP funding, to kind of give us an idea of what we might want to do moving forward. So we've invited Andrea White with Iowa DOT to come and give us a quick presentation on the carbon reduction program. So I will turn it over to Andrea.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate you guys inviting me. This is going to be a very quick overview of the carbon reduction strategy and carbon reduction program. I'm with our systems planning office at the DOT. I was the primary author of the reduction strategy. If you want to go to the next slide. So the carbon reduction strategy, this was a new requirement for states to develop as part of the most recent Transportation Reauthorization Bill, which was 2021's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's required to be developed in consultation with MPOs. We started ours late in 2022 and completed it last year. It was approved by Federal Highway back in February, and it has to be updated every 4 years. Our approach for the strategy was to address the federal requirements, but keep it pretty streamlined. We saw this more as an opportunity to pull together what MPOs and the DOT were already doing as part of their planning process, as opposed to creating something brand new. So we looked at all of our MPO long-range plans across the state, as well as other specialized plans that might have strategies related to carbon reduction and improving air quality. And we also looked at our own DOT plans. I'll talk about the strategies in a second, but I wanted to make note that they are wide-ranging. We didn't want the strategy to just be a list of what's eligible for carbon reduction program funding. We've already got that in the law. We wanted the strategy to be more all-encompassing, so you'll see that the strategies do range from kind of high planning level to a lower project level. They may involve or require other stakeholders besides just an MPO or a DOT, may require some other public and private sectors. And they also align better with other funding programs besides just the carbon reduction program funding. I want to go to the next slide. This shows the strategies. There are 17 across the 5 areas you can see highlighted there. This was synthesized out of, I want to say, 350 different strategies and initiatives that we pulled from the various plans across the state. So we really tried to get everything melded together into a comprehensive but concise list. They are not prioritized, but they are listed in terms of frequency of occurrence. So multimodal transportation was the one that occurred most often across our various plans across the state. So we're aiming at getting people into anything other than a single occupant vehicle, basically. Operational efficiency, those are projects aimed at improving traffic flow, improving the efficiency of the existing system. Alternative fuels, that's an area we've seen a lot of growth recently, particularly providing the infrastructure for it or the vehicles that utilize it. Construction, it's a growing area, I think, in terms of incorporating more sustainable, lower carbon emitting elements into construction processes and into the way that projects themselves are constructed. And finally, we had some miscellaneous strategies that didn't really fall into the other 4, but are certainly important for this topic, such as the transportation land use connection, as well as improving freight efficiency. So that gives you a little overview of the strategies. So this slide talks about the carbon reduction program itself. So this was a new funding program with IJA. This is a federal formula program. So that means Iowa has a specific amount allocated to it. It's about 80 million across the 5 years of the IJA bill. It does require that some of it be spent in certain population areas. 65% has to be spent in those various areas you see on the pie chart there. So Iowa DOT decided to approach this by providing TMAs and MPOs their own target of CRP funding to program for their areas, similar to your STBG and TAP targets. And then Iowa DOT is programming the funds for the smaller population areas, as well as that goes to anywhere in the state. As part of providing you the target, we're also providing you the opportunity to determine your own selection and prioritization process. Our goal with the strategy was to make it all encompassing, allow each MPO to decide, if they want to focus on all strategies, if they want to kind of narrow in what types of projects they want to focus on in their area. It's up to each MPO to make that decision. It's also up to you whether you kind of require some type of tie to the carbon reduction strategy as you make these decisions or not. We're not currently requiring you to show a specific tie to that strategy. You want to note that CRP funded projects are required to be treated as projects on federal aid highways. So most of you are probably well familiar with what that means in terms of the additional regulations that brings along with it. The exception of this is public transportation projects. Those funds will be transferred to FTA and administered through the normal FTA process. So outside of that, remember that any projects you fund will need to go through the typical project development process for a federal aid project. You would likely be working with someone either on our grants team or our local systems bureau. That project development, we haven't designated a specific person per se to do that. It might be spread amongst multiple people based on one of those project development. We are figuring this out at the same time you are. So our guidance and requirements for it may evolve and change. We do want to try to make sure these funds get out the door and are used efficiently and try to minimize the administrative burden on both project sponsors and the DOT. As part of that, we have restricted a couple of uses. One is preliminary and construction engineering. So that's consistent with our guidance on our STBG funds, where we don't allow that type of use for those funds. The second is we have we're not allowing electric vehicle charging infrastructure unless it's part of public transportation project. The reason for that is because there's a clause under the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI program, that any federal highway funded charging infrastructure has to follow all of the requirements of the NEVI program. The NEVI program requirements are quite burdensome. They've been quite onerous for the DOT to try to implement at a state level, and we feel it would be too onerous for a small local agency to try to implement. So that's why we're not allowing that use. If you go to the next slide, this will give you an idea of what we are, or what is listed as eligible uses under the law. The link there, which I think is also in your agenda, has the full list, but it's the types of things you would expect. Basically, anything that's going to improve air quality and reduce carbon emissions are the types of projects you can look at funding. So that's traffic monitoring and management type projects, public transportation alternatives like bike and ped facilities, things that will reduce congestion, ITS type improvements, travel demand management strategies, etc. That one, second to the bottom bullet, projects to improve traffic flow under CMAQ that do not involve new construction. A type of improvement you're going to see there would be like a roundabout, or perhaps turn lane improvements at an intersection. Things that will improve flow, decrease the emissions at that intersection are going to be eligible under that clause. So the MPO, they asked me to talk about what other Iowa MPOs are doing. They're doing the same thing you are, which is figuring out what they're doing. I don't believe any MPOs had a process going last year or programmed these funds last year. The three common areas I've heard from other Iowa MPOs are focusing on TAP projects. I think a couple are actually just putting the funding into their TAP program and just allocating it that way. Public transportation, like your policy board voted. We've seen several that want to put it towards bus purchases. And then there's ITS components, things like signal optimization has also come up a few times. Then I have also heard an MPO mention a roundabout, and another one mentioned possibly other intersection improvements. So those are the most common things we're seeing right now, but we won't really know until June when we get the draft tips what exactly everyone's settled on. So that's all I had. Just wanted to provide a very quick overview. Happy to answer any questions, or else just interested in hearing where your conversation goes.
Thank you, Andrea. Questions for Andrea? I have one just for clarification. So alternative fuels is one of the strategies in the carbon reduction strategy. But then if charging it, I think if I understood you correctly, charging infrastructure isn't eligible, but then would things like fleet be eligible? So like electric vehicles for, you know, like a electric, I don't know, garbage truck or snowplow.
Potentially. I believe that's probably eligible under the law. It's not something we've specifically discussed at this point with our federal highway office, or if there's any considerations as to whether it's challenging to implement when you have to treat projects like a federal aid highway project. But I think it would potentially be eligible. On any of these types of projects where there's any gray area, I would say just get your questions to the MPO and get them to me, and I'll ask federal highway and we get some clarification. There's going to be a lot of these things where we kind of have to go through that process on the first round to figure out if something is indeed eligible and we think it's administratively doable.
So this might be an area where you were kind of saying at the top, this is an overall strategy, not just a strategy for this funding source.
Right.
Got
exactly.
it. Thank you. Anything else before we move on? Oh, sorry, this is an optional vote.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that, Zach?
Yeah, so I think just in light of everything that's kind of happened over the last couple of months with the CRP program and the award to DART and some discussions that have happened, I think staff's recommendation would be that we form a small subcommittee to look at the CRP program and develop an overall recommendation for how we move forward with the process. And so we just wanted to get this committee's kind of feedback on whether or not forming that subcommittee is something, a direction that you want to go.
We have thoughts for Zach. I think personally, I think it would be helpful for a few folks who are willing to spend some time thinking about this with staff to come up with some recommendations.
And I think as far as just kind of the time commitment we'd be looking at, we might be looking at a couple of hour to hour and a half long subcommittee meetings to get this ironed out.
Ms. Rudy, I would agree with the subcommittee concept and those interested parties that would be willing to participate to explore this in more detail.
Mark with Ankeny, we would support the subcommittee also.
Maybe I'll just ask it this way. Is there anybody who feels strongly that, nope, we have all the information we need? Because I'm not intending to call a vote, frankly, because it seems like, a subcommittee makes sense. We have a couple of members concurring that. And so maybe I'll just ask if there's anybody who feels strongly that, no, we should be just calling a vote on what direction we want to move in. So since it does sound like we have some support for staff's recommendation, I think I'll just ask that anybody who is interested in participating, maybe reach out in the chat right now to Zach, let him know so that Zach could schedule something. Thank you, Mike. I'll let you guys just continue to do that, or if you want to email Zach as well after the meeting, if you want to think out on it a little bit, would just appreciate those who are willing to spend a little bit more time thinking about especially reading through the state's plan, the state strategy, and it seemed like they had done a lot of the work and the research on this, and it makes sense for us to use that as a resource. And thank you for those who volunteered.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8, available funding opportunities. Zach again.
So just wanted to give you a quick update on some available funding opportunities that are out there right now. These are all included in your agenda packet, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on each one, but one of them is the Community Taking Charge Accelerator Program. There's around $54 million available in this, and it's really looking at ways to expand e-mobility. So if you're interested in that, check that out. It's due by May 20th. This one may not be of a lot of interest around here, but there's a Strategic Innovation for Revenue Collection program. It's kind of looking at ways that you could collect user fees on roads or other user-based type revenue mechanisms. There's $15 million available in this program. The Transportation Access Pilot Program might be of interest to some of our member governments. It's due June 7th. They're accepting letters of intent for this pilot program, and it's all about looking at how to improve transportation accessibility. So if any of your communities are thinking about or already in the process of looking at transportation accessibility in your community, this might be something you might want to look at in more detail. We've got a few more on the next slide. The Active Transportation Infrastructure Investment Program. This is due on June 17th. There's almost $45 million available for this, looking at ways to construct new active transportation networks. The State Rec Trail Program through the Iowa DOT, that's coming up on July 1st. So if you want to look into that program for any recreational trails you're thinking about, that's a good one. And then, excuse me, finally, there's the Low Carbon Transportation Material Grant Program. This is an interesting one, looking at how to incorporate more low carbon materials into transportation projects. There's going to be about $800 million available in this program. There's no NOFO out on this yet, but we will keep track of this and let you know when that NOFO comes out. later this year sometime. And I think that's all of them. Like I said, there's more information in your agenda packet. Each one of these has a link, so you can follow that and get more information on each one of these programs. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Zach? I think we have some links in the agenda as well for those to click through or pass on to your peers who might be interested in those funding opportunities as well. Thank you, Zach. Next up, we have upcoming, upcoming events, C.
Yep, thank you. So we have a range of webinars and upcoming events for May. I'll highlight a few I think that might be of interest. May 14th, we have transportation electrification and smart growth. May 30th, we have climate adaptation and resiliency in transportation. June 6th, looking at parking for trails, and June 16th, estimating economic impact of trails and recreation. As for upcoming events, May 16th, the Iowa Institute of Transportation Engineers has kind of a workshop event at the Iowa Department of the Blind on equitable transportation with that department. So feel free to look at the different webinars and events, and happy to take any questions you might have.
Questions for Z? Thank you. Other non-action items of interest to the committee. Do we have any other items?
Yep, I have one. Next slide. Yep, so the Iowa DOT is updating the state rail plan, and as part of that effort, they developed a survey to that is being sent out to different cities and counties to identify various conflict points and incidences with the rail network. So if you are aware of any conflicts or incidences, feel free to enter those into the survey and submit it to the DOT. The DOT is looking for survey completion by June 14th.
I've got one here as well. We talked about streetlight data over the last couple of meetings, or really over the last several months. Last month, this group recommended moving forward with streetlight data and also just getting that data now rather than waiting until the end of the fiscal year or the beginning of the next fiscal year. So that was all approved by the policy committee. So where we're at now is streetlight is finalizing the agreements on their end. That should happen. They said that should happen this week. Possibly has already happened by now. Once that happens, they will start reaching out to us to get people registered. And what this contract includes is that every one of our member communities has at least as one seat that they can have access to streetlight without having to, send a request to us. You'll just have direct access to it. And with that one license or that one seat, you can share that among your community in case there's more than one staff person you want to have use that. In the meantime, feel free to reach out to Z, or you can reach out to me too, with the name and the email address of who you want as your community representative, who you want that email registered to. And then that way, once we get going, they'll just start getting emails of trainings and, access information and so forth to get that rolling. So if there's any questions about any of that, please let us know. But this should be exciting and something hopefully you find value out of.
And I have one last one, and that is that we've been doing a little bit of housekeeping at the MPO offices and dug out from deep in one of our closets some temporary rubber curbs that are used for street demonstration projects. We've put a couple asks out to see if there's interest among our member governments for using these. We would love to see them put to use. What you see is what we have on the screen here. That's what we've got. So if you're interested in these, we'd love to see them go to a place where they'll get some use. Just feel free to reach out to staff.
Any other non-action items of interest to the committee members, anything to share? If not, then our next meeting date is June 6th, and I'll just ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
This is Rudy, I'll move the motion.
And Steve, all second.
Thank you, Rudy and Steve. Any opposed to adjourning? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next month.